How did it begin? Take us back to where you were, where you think it may have happened.
Yeah, you know, of course, like most folks, it was appearing on national news. We'd watch the evening news and hear about coronavirus in China, and it was slowly make its way to the U.S. And by early March, we started to have greater awareness. I think at that time, social distancing was 3 feet. Nobody had set guidelines for how many people could be in a room. There were conversations about being aware of physical contact. And so we had our diocesan synod, which is our annual diocesan meeting, in early March up at All Saints Pauli's Island, and probably had about 150 to 170 people from North and South Carolina. All of our churches gathered for that. And we thought we had put in good precautions. We weren't shaking hands. We didn't pass the peace. In the service, we thought we were maintaining good balance. I had a bottle of Purell in my pocket, and I was Purelling my hands constantly through those 2 days. And everything went well, seemed to go well. And probably later that week, by about Thursday, I started feeling bad. I thought it was allergies at first. I often get seasonal bronchitis this time of the year just because of all the pollen. And so I just started thinking, okay, my allergies are bad, and that's what it started like. And then as that next week progressed, I just wasn't shaking it. And so by midweek, I decided, just in an abundance of caution, I ought to stay home. I was supposed to preach that weekend. I bailed out on services and stayed home through the weekend. And
had you heard at this point that someone
no,
had tested positive?
no. I didn't hear someone had tested positive until I was in the hospital. And and so Monday came. I went online and did the MUSC virtual doctor, and they made arrangements through that on a Monday to get a COVID-19 test. And then just after that test, I went to East Cooper ER to have a lung x-ray just to see if I had pneumonia, if this was flu, if this was bronchitis/pneumonia, or if it was COVID. My x-ray on that Monday, my lung x-ray was fine. They gave me some steroid shot. They sent me home on some steroids. And I was just tired through that week. On Thursday, my wife went to work. On Wednesday, my wife went to work, and I picked her up that night from work. And by Thursday morning, I had 102 temperature. I had no temperature Wednesday, but Thursday morning, I woke up with 102 temperature. Went back to East Cooper Hospital with that temperature. My wife, people aren't allowed in, so she dropped me off, and they gowned me up in masks and gloves, and they did x-rays, and x-rays showed that my lungs were massively affected by COVID. They were still awaiting the test, because at that time, tests took 3 to 5 days. And so the test had not yet come back, but the x-rays, there's a pattern in your lungs that COVID tends to produce. And when they saw the x-rays, they said, we're waiting the test, but we're pretty sure this is COVID.
What did that feel like?
I was shocked, absolutely shocked. As I said, I thought we had done everything right. Of course, now we know social distancing probably needs to be at least 6 feet, and it's overwhelmingly airborne transmitted. And that's been the challenge throughout this whole thing is the medical world is still learning about what this virus does, how it's transmitted, how long it stays, the after effects, because I've had downstream effects from COVID. It wasn't just the pneumonia that I had in the hospital. It's been more than that. It's been blood clots in my legs. It's been developed a kind of neuropathy in my body, which affects my nerves. So at times my arms and legs will be numb, my ribs will be numb. Sometimes the back of my throat is numb. I can't tell if I'm swallowing. I know I'm swallowing, but I can't necessarily feel it. So thankfully, medicine has helped with that, and they've pretty much dialed in the dosage, and so that's helped quite a bit. But there have definitely been downstream consequences. The significant weight loss, which has necessitated a lot of physical therapy just to regain the muscle mass.
How much weight?
About 36 pounds. I weighed less than I graduated. I weighed less when I got out of the hospital than when I graduated from high school. And probably junior year of high school was the weight I was back at. On one hand, it was okay. On the other hand, it was a heck of a way to lose weight. And so, not the best diet plan. But, so anyway, you know, that Thursday night, they began, at East Cooper, they were putting me on oxygen. And they had to keep upping the dosage, and they had to keep upping the mechanism, the mask that they would put on me to raise my oxygen levels. I was pretty tired, so I don't remember a lot of that. A handful of things I remember. I remember calling my boys just to talk with them one-on-one, to tell them I was proud of them, to pray with them. And I remember just before I went on...
You called them because you knew you were about to...
Go on a ventilator. Yep. So I knew that was coming. And I knew at that time, you know, I think we'd seen something on the national news that the ventilators were a 50-50 proposition at that time. It was anxiety-producing thought for me. The biggest thing was the idea of giving control over my body to both doctors but also to a machine. Doctors were fantastic. They assured me that this is what was needed, that my lungs needed a break, that they were so distressed, my body needed a break, and that the machine would do the work for my body, and that they thought it would be a 3 to 5 day proposition. And turned out to be 10 days on the ventilator. And I don't have any cognitive memories of being awake during those 10 days, although I know my wife said they had my phone in there so they would FaceTime her a couple times while I was on the ventilator and allow her to talk to me. And she said there were times when they would lighten the sedation just to make sure I was still in there. And so my eyes would be open, and they'd ask me things like, can you follow me with your eyes? You know, one doctor always wanted me to squeeze her fingers. When she would come in, she'd say, hello, Mr. Wood, you're at East Cooper Hospital. I thought that was a dream, but I do have that memory. She said, you're at East Cooper Hospital, you're doing well. Can you look at me? Can you squeeze my fingers? And I could be responsive. Then they'd measure whatever they had to measure and then resedate me at the level they needed to keep me at. And as I said, I thought those turned out to be memories. I thought at the time those were dreams, as part of a dream. I did dream. I've read afterwards some folks that were on ventilators had nightmares for the time they were on ventilators. I'm very thankful I didn't have nightmares. Mine were actually very good. They were actually engagements with God at times. It was a very, I don't have those frightening memories that some other folks have described coming off ventilator. I have glimpses of memories. They came off on March 30th, and I remember one nurse asked me if I wanted her to shave me. She said, you look pretty scraggly. I said, that would be wonderful. And I have vague memories of being shaved. What I do remember is she said, let's sit you up in a chair and take a picture for your wife. And so they got me in a chair right next to my bed, which was a momentous amount of effort for me to get out of bed and get into a chair. Thankfully, she was very helpful to get me there. And I've seen the picture, and I recognize the look on my face. It was just I was thrilled. I could just tell by my smile that I was thrilled that I just felt, in that moment, I felt okay.
Like you beat it.
Yeah, well, not quite yet. There were a couple days after coming off the ventilator when there were just some moments when I wasn't sure I was going to make it.
Even after the ventilator?
Yeah. I hurt. I thought this was a respiratory thing, but actually it does affect your whole body, and it affected my whole body. So I've never been in a car accident, but I felt like I was in a car accident. I mean, every part of my body hurt, everything. My arms, my legs, my chest, everything hurt. I couldn't, food was repulsive, couldn't even take the thought of eating, and which was one of the things that they needed to do. They had to teach me to swallow again, because having been on the ventilator for so long, the reflex or muscular control that allows you to swallow had dissipated, and so I actually had to have a therapist come in and teach me how to swallow. And we started with applesauce, which I generally find repulsive, but it was, I had to have something. They had a feeding tube in me for the days I was on a ventilator. And they had actually told me if I didn't start eating, they were going to put the tube back in. And so I was motivated at that point to try to eat. But it took a little while before I could, a little while, a day and a half before I would start to eat something like scrambled eggs. I was nervous because the very first time I tried to swallow something was water, and it went down my airway, and I started gagging. And I thought, that's enough of that. And so I remember just again, the woman working with me, teaching me tricks on how to swallow properly. And
How do you teach that?
yeah. Actually, it was very simple. It was put something in your mouth, and as you swallow, put your head down and touch your chin, and that helps direct where it goes. So that was a couple days after waking up. But my first real memories of being alert was April 1st. Of all days, right? April 1st, I came off on a Monday, so this was, a Wednesday, I guess. I think it was it was the next weekend, I think. And so, came off. I have full memory of that day. I remember waking up, actually thought, I feel okay today, until I had to get out of bed. They had a walker for me, and they started walking me. My physical therapist would have me walk around the room. They tied the stretchy bands to the sides of the bed, and they had me using my arms on the bands.
During this, are you like, what the heck is happening?
Yeah. Again, I thought it was lungs, and it really affected everything. From my lungs are still inflamed. Other consequences that I didn't have, thank God. It has affected people's hearts and kidneys, livers, internal organs, and so thankfully I was spared those things. Other than my lungs are, as I said, they're still inflamed.
Is that going to be a permanent?
They don't think so. They can't. So the constant answer I get from the medical world is, we don't know.
You were one of the first around here. Like you were the guinea pig.
I am. And one doctor was candid enough to tell me, we don't know, and we're watching you to see what happens. And because I was one of the earliest people to contract this.
Does that send your stomach into your throat, your heart into your throat?
Not anymore. It did, sure, it did. I thought, I'm not used to the medical world just saying we don't know. And but they've gotten a handle on it. They are getting some global data, and so I've watched my treatment progress. I've watched increased confidence as we think this will be good. I had to go back into the hospital April 26th. They found out the week before I went in that I had blood clots. They found out that COVID produces a hypercoagulability. And so one of my doctors called me on a Monday and said, we need to start you on Eliquis. But it was too late. The clots had already developed. And I found that out the next Sunday when I had to be readmitted.
They told you that, look, blood clots are a thing.
Yep.
We need to get on this.
Yep. And they did not know that on April 3rd. But 2.5 weeks later, global data was emerging that young men in their 30s and 40s, Wall Street Journal ran an article, young men in their 30s and 40s were collapsing in New York while running from strokes because they'd had COVID, and it produces a hypercoagulability. So they were reading those reports that were coming in, called me proactively, said, we need to get you on Eliquis. But I said, the clots I had 2 clots in my leg, they'd already developed. And we found that out on the Sunday, the 26th of April, when I had to go back in, because I'd passed out, not due to the clot, but due to the pain I was in.
I was going to say, were they painful?
Clots weren't painful. They were tender. My leg was sore. The pain was mostly chest and upper body because my lungs were so inflamed, my diaphragm was irritated, and I passed out in the middle of the night. My wife took me to East Cooper, And in the process of doing all the things they did, CT scans, MRIs, they found clots in my legs. The good side of that was they did everything. I had a full body MRI, I had an echocardiogram, I had a CT scan on my chest, CT scan on my head and neck, and all of those came back wonderful. Echocardiogram report was very good. My heart was not swollen, it was functioning properly, and the full body MRI showed that there was no effect in my brain or nervous system. And so very good news on that regard. So then it became just dealing with the clots. So I went in on a Monday and was discharged on a Wednesday. And they had me on a heparin drip for most of Sunday, part of Monday. Then they started me on another blood thinner that I'd continued. Actually, yesterday was my first day off, where I'd give myself 2 shots in the stomach, morning and night. And now I'm back on the original medicine they put me on that Monday in April, Eliquis, to probably, they said, 4 to 6 months, just to make sure I'm past any hypercoagulability. And I don't feel that. What I feel is the neuropathy. What I feel, I woke up one morning and I couldn't feel my feet. And so I had to literally watch the ground to make sure I was lifting my feet and putting them down properly, because I couldn't tell. And thankfully that's passed. But I still have some residual. I'll get a numbness down this arm, and these fingers will become numb. Sometimes my ribs will get numb. Occasionally I'll get a pain right under my right breast. But again, as they've dialed in the dosage of my medicine, that's becoming less and less frequent. Still have a little bit of a cough. They told me I might cough for a while, and it's not bad, but just occasionally I have a little bit of a cough. And but for the most part, I'm probably, well, if you factor in the weight, the muscle loss, I'm probably at 65 to 70% of where I was physically before I went in. The PT, it's not overly impressive. They have me where I've graduated now. They started me on 1 pound weights. I'm now working my way up to 5 pound weights. Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 hours. I wasn't. I mean, I weighed about 180 when I went in. I was health conscious. I walked significant steps. I would typically walk 15 to 20,000 steps a day, just through the course of my work. But then I would add in a morning walk and an evening walk, and I was in okay shape, and I was in okay shape, and so. I was surprised. The sad part was I still have a little bit of belly fat, and I thought, why didn't it take care of that? It took my muscle.
Is it hard to get your head around the fact that 3 of you
Yeah.
here tested positive?
Yeah.
And it seems like in the 3 of you, it was totally different in all 3.
Totally different.
Asymptomatic, some symptoms,
Yeah.
but otherwise okay.
Yeah.
And
then me. Yeah.
FaceTiming with your sons to say, hey, I'm going on this thing and I may not come off.
Yeah. It was. I've told a couple people. I've never been a why me. Some people say, and then these things, well, why God? Why me? These things happen in life, right? God does nowhere does God tell His people He will spare them these things. What He promises that I'll be with you through this. So I've never been a why me. My general posture is, well, why not me? If people are going to get it, I'm as likely to get something as anyone else. I don't believe in some kind of divine super bubble that keeps His people free from cancer, any kind of illness, right? The promise is He'll be with us in the midst of it. And so that was kind of my mentality. Yeah, I was, as bad as I felt on the Thursday when they had me on oxygen, I fully expected the diagnosis to come back at that point that I have COVID, because I'd never felt this bad in my life. And I knew this was nothing I've ever had before. It was not pneumonia, it was not bronchitis, it was something wholly different. And so, post, there's a few times David says it in the Psalms, but in Psalm 27, He said, I will speak of the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And two things struck me from that. One of my earliest thoughts was thanking the Lord that I remained in the land of the living. The idea of death is not something I fear. I just wasn't ready. And I told the Lord that pretty directly on a couple occasions. And my prayer life is a very conversational life with God. It's not just petition of, oh Lord, please do this. It's, okay, I don't feel real good today, Lord. I need your strength, I need your help. It's very conversational, right? Sharing my thoughts, sharing my heart with him is very much my prayer life. And because of that, my prayer life continues basically throughout the day. It's not, there are times of set focused prayer, but it's as though if you and I were spending the day together walking through the old village and we were just having a conversation. That's very much my prayer life. And so, one of the profound gratitude, I was very weepy probably the first 2 to 3 weeks. Still can't watch. I watch the local news because it's local. I can't watch the evening news because it's national and it's all about COVID and it's everyone dying. And so I still find that a bridge too far. Can't watch that yet. But I was very weepy, thinking about the people that are going through COVID in hospitals. It's very lonely. No family can see you. Anyone that comes in is gowned. Now they're fantastic. The doctors and the nurses at East Cooper were extraordinary. Every one of them that came in made sure to make some kind of physical contact, held my hand, put their hand on my shoulder, some kind of physical contact, because it was lonely. And the evenings, the night times were the hardest. They were very lonely. When I came home, the first day I came home, I was ecstatic to get home. And then bedtime came, and I panicked because I realized for the first time in over 2 weeks, no one's watching me to make sure I'm okay. And I thought, I miss my machines, and I miss my hourly visit from my nurse. So the first couple nights, going to sleep was difficult because there was no one to watch to make sure I was okay. And I think that's pretty common. I think as folks get out of, you recover from, friends of mine that have had heart attacks or other major issues said, yeah, nighttime, falling asleep was tough. And that's gotten better. It's gotten a lot better, but nighttime remained the hardest. First time Jackie and I sat down to have a meal together, and I went to say grace, I just started crying because I was just overwhelmed that I was home, that I was with my wife, I was still alive. And the next few weeks, my boys would make visits to the house, and I'd sit in a chair behind, we have a storm door, glass storm door, and they'd call me on their phone and stand in the front yard, and I'd talk to them on my phone, looking at them through the front door. And still as they come over, they're still masked. I've told a lot of folks that I'm probably the safest person to be around from the point of view, you're not going to get COVID from me. But I have a slight risk of catching something from someone else, from a cold to pneumonia. And so, yeah. And so, my general posture, when people ask me how I am, in light of the fact that I'm in the land of the living, and in light of the fact, Psalm 27, that David asked to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, I can definitively say I've seen the goodness of the Lord, and that I remain in the land of the living. And I think that's important, because I think some people think of faith as a life insurance, that life might be bad now, but it'll be better when we get to heaven. And I don't think the faith is just endure this life until you get to heaven. I think the promise is we see the goodness of the Lord in this life now. And I've seen that. And so when folks ask me how I am, my response is every day's a good day. Some days are better than others. And that's how I feel. It's been
This has strengthened your faith.
Yes.
Their faith has been dinged.
Yeah, it did. Now, I will say, I wrestled with faith. There were times I felt the need to remind God he promises to be with us, because I didn't feel him at times. There were some very hard hours. For whatever reason, I would tend to wake up, particularly in the hospital, and even when I got home, I would tend to wake up pretty consistently around 3 in the morning. Yeah, it was. It was. And I'd be awake for a little while. And so, blessedly, I had some friends that knew this. And so I had a handful of friends that worked second shift who would text me around 2 or 3 in the morning because they knew I was awake, and they would, "Hey, Steve, I'm praying for you. You're probably awake now. Just want you to know you're on my mind. I'm praying." A Bible verse, a line from a hymn. And then I had a number of other friends that would text me first thing in the morning when they got up around 6 or 7. So the first thing now the great challenge was, for a few days in the hospital, I didn't have the manual dexterity to unlock my phone. And my throat was so raw, Siri wouldn't respond to my voice commands. But I'd see the ding, I'd hear the ding, and I could look at my phone, and I could see briefly the notice before it faded. Again, by April 1st, it was better. I couldn't type well, but I could unlock my phone. And the second time I went in, not knowing what I was going to deal with, I just took the lock off my phone, so I wouldn't have to mess with that. But so there were some long nights. St. John of the Cross, who wrote a while ago, wrote a book called The Dark Night of the Soul. It's overly dramatic language for me. I don't use that kind of language typically. But there were experiences in the hospital where I felt alone. And I recalled scripture. I mean, again, I couldn't open a Bible. So it was just scriptures I've learned over the years that I would just rehearse in my mind, hymns and praise songs that I've known over the years, that I would recall those to my mind.